Hi, this is Eternal King here, bringing you another LOR video today. I wanted to look at some of the top um, decks for the new Eternal season. I played a lot of Eternal. I've been winning a lot of games. I've been building a lot of decks. I've been brewing constantly. And I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp on where Eternal is heading going into the next season for Ranked Ladder. So I wanted to showcase off some of the lists that I think you would be feeling pretty comfortable playing for a variety of reasons. First one is upgraded Azir Aurelia. So Azir Aurelia with the Emperor's Army, I have an entire video covering this deck, is insane. This deck requires hard counters. Hard counters to deal with a lot of its combo potential. So a lot of that has to do with things just like Treasure Seeker on 1 being a very easy empty drop to get Awakening Sands. Playing either Emperor's Dais on 2 or Emperor's Army on 2. Again, you have twice the chances to draw one of them. And then you count down Emperor's Army until you're ready for the final part of the activation. When you summon an ally this round, give it 2+0. And then you can combine that with things like Aurelia to create, and of course Azir and your other landmarks and just all the blade dancing you're doing to make all your tokens pretty massive. I've seen people go as far to play things like Nora Morgana because they were just like so sick of getting murdered by this deck over and over and over again. And obviously when that happens, if someone tries to counter you, you just switch, right? If the entire ladder queue all of a sudden decided that they had to hard counter this list, you would just swap. But what this deck does, it does exceptionally well, and it's basically, one of the best, not pure aggro lists, but like combo aggro, rally-based, decks in the game. It's incredibly powerful with Emperor's Army. I can't overstate that. One of the other best decks in the game that I believe is top tier. Been feeling very positive lately about Annie Jin. Annie Jin used to be a deck I wasn't overly hot on because I used to play a lot of Ziggs Poppy on ladder, and Ziggs Poppy is a very good counter for Annie aggro. But because there were so many Eddie decks running around, specifically Eddie Ramp, Eddie Freljord decks, Ziggs Poppy fell off in a pretty big way. In my opinion, I think Ziggs Poppy has fallen off in a pretty big way. So Annie Jin is actually superior just right now. It's going to be faster into those Eddie decks, much, much faster. It's going to turbo flip Annie. It's going to push a lot of burn to face. And then when the opponent tries to like ramp on mana 5 and then ramp again to get to their 6 drops, they're already going to be down to like 10 HP guaranteed, if not lower, with a leveled Annie. And then, you're potentially swinging with like a leveled Jin as well, and then Decimates and Rage Fire Spitter to push that last bit of damage. Lots of burn at the end of this list. So again, undoubtedly, something like this is one of the best decks in the game, just right now. As long as Eddie Ramp and Eddie decks are running rampant, this is going to feel pretty good. Obviously, when there's more like Eddie Demacia, this deck is a little worse because Eddie Demacia runs Morgana. But then, something like Ziggs Poppy is better, and then if the opponent is running more, Eddie Ramp, then Annie's better. But right now I tend to find there's more Ramp lists running around than Demacia lists in Eternal, so then Annie Jin is the way to go. Third top tier deck is going to be the new Jinx list. So I'm very positive on Lulu Jinx right now. I think the Lulu Jinx list is pretty strong. Levels Jinx easily. Obviously, you have the Flame Chomper. So basically, you Electro Harpoon Flame Chomper, and you ping a thing, and you get your Flame Chomper, and then Lulu comes down on 3, and likely you've dropped a 1-drop as well. And that curve of 1, 2 on the Flame Chomper, and then 3 Lulu is so incredibly strong for tempo that, again, into those Eddie Ramp lists and things like that, you're going to be having a pretty good time. And then otherwise, it's just like, get excited, get exciting things. Spirit Portaling things is one of the new changed cards. This is not a new card, but it was changed to be much better because now it grants Spirit to all allies. And we all know that all the new cards that have been modified to grant Spirit are actually pretty good. Just outside of like Lux Illuminated, just like as cards, the new Spirit cards are good. Mid-tier stuff. Pretty nice selection of mid-tier decks that I think are pretty successful into this meta. So we already talked about it. It is Jinx. It is Ziggs Poppy. So Ziggs Poppy got me to top 100 last season. It was universally one of the best decks in the game. But then as the meta shifts, when things like Eddie Ramp become more powerful, what you'll find is that this deck isn't always able to consistently push enough damage in the early turns to finish off something like a Eddie Ramp list. And increasingly people are teching more into dealing with just like plain old go wide strategies. So just like jamming like Beard and then House Spider and then Ziggs on 3, like that used to be universally enough to just win a lot of games. It won't always, and then Poppy on 4. It's not quite as strong right now, but still a strong mid-tier aggro deck for sure. Can't go wrong with Ziggs Poppy. It's a good old staple to keep in your pocket. So in this case, I'm just going to call this the Eddie deck, just like any Eddie deck, right? So Eddie Demacia, Eddie Freljord, Eddie Auchan. Just pick your favorite. It doesn't matter. Most of the Eddie decks are fundamentally the same. Some of them are more memey, where like they're trying to get out big stuff much faster, like Hey Show and basically 10 mana cards. So like any sort of 10 mana play. Like a lot of people like to use the Cythria, so 10 mana Cythria, Hey Show. She Who Wanders, a lot of that stuff is kind of getting more popular than just Auchan Eddie and Demacia Eddie. So, but I'm just going to call it the Eddie deck, because they're fundamentally all the same. Some of them go bigger, some of them are more tempo, but it's the same deck. So just pick your favorite Eddie deck and then call that your mid-tier deck, mid-tier staple. I've actually been feeling pretty positive about Lurk lately. I know it's a weird thing to like, really Lurk? I think Rally Lurk is pretty good. It's kind of slept on in Eternal specifically. I think a lot of this ratioing I kind of based on old school Majin Bay ratioing for Lurk, like the 2 Blood Baits. I'm on 3 Forsaken Bakai, 3 Sharkling, 3 Hatchling, so the turn 1 advantage needs to happen. Inspiring Chronomancer on 2. Turn 2 predict, turn 1 predict, turn 3 predict, making the deck as consistent as possible when it comes to hitting your Rek'Sais and your Pikes. So it's not just like high roll only, it's actually fairly consistent, regardless of the attack order you draw or you land on. And then I do like the 3 Blood in the Waters. So yeah, pretty positive about Lurk lately, honestly. The nerf to Pike to 5 mana has actually made him kind of a cool card. I used to hate this deck. I thought it was like Unga Bunga dumb aggro stuff and just like high roll Pike stuff. But like now that Pike was nerfed, it's actually kind of hard to play Lurk properly. And I kind of like the deck. Yeah, probably like a 52% win rate, kind of mid-tier to low-tier kind of deck. It's fun. Keep Lurk in your back pocket. Obviously very good into Eddie Ramp as well. Low-tier decks. It is going to be upgraded Taric Poppy. So I think upgraded Taric Poppy with Veiled Blessing is pretty good. Taric Poppy used to be a staple rally-based combo deck. People haven't really caught on to this yet, but Veiled Blessing really brings the deck back in a big way, in my opinion. It's just one more card, like Blessing of Targon, that you can jam on the Taric and then jam on something else when you swing. And even when you're not playing it on your Taric, during your attack swing, you can play it reactively, and they're kind of just good enough at that point as well. And the rest of it's pretty typical Taric Poppy stuff. Low tier, more low tier essentials. So it is Bandletree. I I think Bandletree's a pretty great control deck with an OTK win con. I think it's a solid way to go into a lot of any matchups because it's, again, OTK decks are good in Eternal right now. Bandletree, and then the next deck I'll be showing you that is also an OTK deck is going to be Upgraded Rise. I think Upgraded Rise is actually a pretty solid deck. Now, you have to keep in mind, it's very matchup dependent. The way that I've teched my Rise deck is basically to win 100% of mid-range matchups. That is the way that I play Rise. With the new Steel Gale card, it's just like Steel Tempest, Steel Gale, Homecoming, Will of Ionia, and then Unworthy Soul. And like that's just like a wall of stuns and bounces that opponents just can't get through. Ritual of Renewal, because you're still going to need a little bit of healing. And then you have your Chumpers, Trick or Trade for Otterpuss, Claws, and Eyes. And that's all the Chumpers I want to run here. Otherwise, I want to keep the list as clean as possible and as clutter-free as possible. But it's good. It has its matchups. It also really doesn't, but it has its matchups. Situational tier. So decks that I think are situationally strong. It is stuff like Jace Lux. So Jace Lux is a deck that is either top tier or more of a middling tier based entirely on the kind of matchups you run into. So Shock Blast, Hex Obliterator, turbo leveling the Jace, turbo leveling the Lux, and then having all of these Chumpers to block the way is only as good as the matchups you run into. In the decks where opponents just empty play champions and you just remove them for free, it's exceptionally strong. It's good into aggro, it's good into mid-range, it's good into a lot of things. The minute the opponent just starts running things like Persistent Shadow Isles value or things with Spell Shield, or just start hard running like Denies and stuff like that, the deck will start to fall off pretty massively. So it's like, that's why I call it situational. It's always good, but it is either amazing or more middling depending on the situation. But it is my favorite control deck, like pure control. Other decks that I think are good in like a situational fashion. You know, you could say Zed Gwen. I kind of forgot about Zed Gwen, but I'll include Zed Gwen in the list of situational decks that are pretty strong. Everyone knows what Gwen does, so I'm not going to spend too long on this, but it's just like a basic ephemerals list, and if you want to say like Gwen Hecarim instead, sure. Same diff. It's the same deck. Doesn't really change anything. So I would say Zed Gwen's pretty situationally strong. And then we also have some of the upgrades to Transform. So I think Transform is situationally strong. I went on like a day where I was just tearing all across Eternal with this deck. Because it does a few things exceptionally well. And it's largely due to, one thing is a new card, and the other thing is the change to an existing card. So first thing is Bristlehog was buffed to a 3/3. This is very relevant because the best line of play you can have in a Transform deck is Bristlehog into All-Train Trooper. And what you do is you play Bristlehog on 1, and then if you have attack token on 2, you play All-Train Trooper and transform it for free, and then drag their like 1-drop or 2-drop with Bristlehog, and then get a free swing with a 3/1. And it's like one of the best tempo plays in the game. It's exceptionally strong. I believe you do want to be on pings, things like Pokestick, things like Glare, and then just run your Transform value package. Blimp Pack Poacher to capture things, Avenging Vastaya to counterspell things, so like 2 Denies. Chief Nick Attack is your tribal card. Curious Changeling they started including Curious Changeling in the decks largely due to Wings Giving. So I think Wings Giving, transforming things, making followers that cost 1 more. The whole point of Curious Changeling is that once you've successfully ramped up the mana cost of one of your followers, you can play Curious Changeling and then get the cash out on Wings Giving even harder. But I think that's a little memey, so I only run the 2 copies personally. And then Gnar, Nidalee, Towering Pyrophant for the Overwhelm, and Big Game Tycoon for the endgame value. It's a strong list, situationally strong in terms of what it does. Like, just Bristle Hog into All Terrain Trooper, and then rolling out the Nidalee after is like incredibly strong from a tempo perspective. Like, just that alone makes this deck like one to watch out for. But unlike standard, it's not like crazy or anything. It's just situationally good. And yeah, I think that's kind of everything. I guess if we want to talk about like one meme tier deck that I think I like bringing out every now and then, it is birds. So this is like, we'll call this meme tier. I love playing birds now and then. It's really fun. And this was like the competitive birds list I built out a long time ago. Still does some really interesting things in terms of a Demacia deck. Like, obviously you have like Omen Hawk into Snow Dog because a lot of decks are good that way. But being able to do things like turning all your challengers into quick attackers, it's a very unique mechanic to birds, and no other tribal deck can do that. So just that by itself, of like, if your Shimmerwing gets to stick, it's a big deal. And if your Shimmerwing happens to have some extra stats on it, so it's harder to kill, it's a big deal. Obviously better when there's like less bounces and hard removal, but pretty good in those situations. It's a fun tribal deck. I would consider birds the best Nico deck currently in terms of Eternal. If I had to choose like all the Nico variations, there's like turbo level Nico, there's go big Nico, mid-range Nico. I would say that birds Nico is probably my personal favorite Nico deck. So yeah, this is Eternal King signing out. I just wanted to go through a variety of decks that I thought were pretty solid in Eternal in terms of things that you could or might want to play. And I think that's a pretty good cross-section of like the different kinds of decks you will run into and the different kinds of decks that I believe are viable once the ladder reopens. All right, I hope you found that informative. This is Eternal King signing out.